This is the Surly Grognards for September 9th, 2014. This is Peter Bowman, and as usual, I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Eric Carlson. How are you doing tonight, Eric?
I'm doing all right.
Excellent. So this week, we actually got several topic suggestions on the forums. Thank you guys. We appreciate that.
Hooray!
And we're going to use one of them this week, the one that we sort of spoke to us, as a one we could do and do an interesting show on short preparation. Because as usual, we didn't really think about it until just before the show.
Yeah, shock of shocks.
And there are a couple other ones that at least one of the other ones we wanted to spend a little time thinking about before we did the show. But what we're going to be talking about tonight is time travel in role-playing games.
I have no idea why I said that.
Well, it's because you probably can't do the Doctor Who theme that well.
It's because I'm tone deaf and don't have a theremin.
Exactly. Speaking of the Doctor Who theme, the new theme is not that great.
But the opening sequence is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I just wish the music worked better.
Yeah.
And to get it out of the way, yes, I think both of us absolutely adore Peter Capaldi.
Yes, he's great. The last episode wasn't so good.
I actually really liked the Robin Hood episode.
Seeing as it's a straight comedy, I enjoyed it. But, really fucking golden arrow into the engine that will somehow make everything better? Really?
I liked it better than last week's episode. I thought it was much better written.
It was pretty funny. I'll say that. And oh my god, I'm doing banter. I hate banter.
Capaldi's awesome.
Yes.
And the guy that got to play Robin Hood was also really good.
Yes.
But we're not really going to talk about Doctor Who, because we've done that before.
Well, we probably will soon.
We'll probably talk about Doctor Who during the episode while we're talking about other stuff, but we've already dedicated an entire show to Doctor Who, and that went long, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Not that Eric and I can't even finish that sentence. We both love Doctor Who.
Yeah. Well, Doctor Who's awesome.
I agree. But at any rate, time travel in role-playing games. So, Eric.
Yeah.
Have you had much time travel in role-playing games? In the games you've played?
Well, there's the requisite time travel in Feng Shui. That just happens.
Right.
I mean, and I want to say yes, but I can't think of any specific instances. Almost certainly involving a sci-fi game. Because, of course, there's time travel in science fiction. There always has to be a time travel episode.
Right. I don't think I've had time travel in my sci-fi games. I had some dimension hopping, but not time travel, and we'll touch on that a little bit later on, I think.
Well, that depending on how you what version of quantum mechanics you subscribe to, that's it's the same thing.
This is actually true. Actually, the game I've had the most time travel, type of game I've had the most time travel in is superheroic games. Because duh.
Yeah, actually.
Bad guys from the future come back to, try to muck about in the past. Classic staple trope in comic books. Hell, there's one game I had where not one, but two of the player characters had characters who were from the future and stuck in the past.
I've had a couple character concepts like that, honestly.
Both were weirdly anthropomorphic animals.
Of course they were.
And one of them... this is a classic case. One of them was Tox, I think both of us, we mentioned on the show once or twice. A friend of ours, a guy we used to game with, whom neither of us have seen in years, but he was fairly, at least I gamed with him a fair bit, played a bunch of role-playing games with him. He was fairly notorious for coming out with fairly wacky characters, unshockingly if you knew Tox. But my brother had this incredible knack for, without meaning to, his characters would always do something, interact with, Tox's stuff in weird and unexpected ways. There was been just, my brother just had several times when he was, hang on, I should close my window. Should have done this before the show started. As there's a motorcycle idling outside.
they make everything better. I couldn't hear it, but
fair enough. My mic's doing a good job. It was distracting me though. So,
all right.
but at any rate, Ben's got this. But as I said, he's got a knack for having weird interactions with Tox's characters and/or plot lines that Tox is running things without meaning to. And so Tox's character was an anthropomorphic fox from the 31st century, 30th century, from the 30th century fox. And yes, he would do the fanfare.
Oh, that's terrible.
Now, one of the things Tox's character had is that he could get back to he would occasionally just be warped back to the future at random times. Because his schedule was a little bit such that he couldn't make it to he wouldn't necessarily be able to make it every game, so I figured that'd be a good in-game explanation for why. I approved of that, but that meant whenever he showed up, he would do the fanfare, which I approved of less. At any rate, so his character had he'd come back in time to prevent some awful future from the future which he's from, which was bad from happening, and involved like anthropomorphic apes, trying to take over, basically, trying to undo Planet of the Apes type stuff, etc. Like the apes were like the bad guys. My brother's character was a cybernetic gorilla time traveler coming back in time to prevent some other awful future from happening from a different timeline. But of course, he shows up, and Tox's character's like, "Wait, what the fuck? Are you trying to stop me from achieving what I'm going? What the hell are you talking about?"
Yes, I am. Because your future results in my future. You preventing your future results in my future, which is much worse because I'm cybernetic.
I don't know, but
actually, that would be great.
Well, yeah, Ben had no idea what Tox's deal was when he made the character, so that's the best part. Totally done completely independently. His arrival scene was hilarious because he showed up, looked around, looked at newspapers, and realized he'd basically come to the wrong timeline apparently. But he's like looks at his fistful of Confederate money.
Dope.
Sighs, and just finds a trash can, just like. He had the wrong currency. He's like, well, I'm broke and stuck here. Great.
Awesome.
I don't think it was Confederate money, but something along those lines.
That would be hilarious, though.
At any rate,
or Soviet rubles.
Right. Things along those lines. Like, currency is currently useless. It's like... Right. At any rate, so I've had time travel in my superhero games a fair bit because, duh. But there are always some, various pitfalls to it. Just because, it's time travel,
Right.
And I'm just wondering what your sort of thoughts, your thoughts on it are to start off with.
I've had the whole time travel thing can be fun, particularly when you have something terrible has happened and you're given the opportunity to go back in time to prevent it, and the act of doing so just creates the horrible thing. That's always a wonderful fuck you to the players. It's a loving fuck you, I want to say.
I guess. I don't know. That's one of the things I would avoid doing personally as a game master. Right. That really is sort of basically rubbing their noses in their powerlessness, and that occasion that with the right group that can work, but with the wrong group, with a lot of groups, that's a really bad idea.
I guess. Maybe I've just been watching too much Star Trek.
Oh, it works great as
as a narrative thing, yeah. And yeah, the whole going back in time to prevent the horrible future as a character concept is a great one. I haven't actually used it, but I've had the concept for a few things, and also accidentally going back in time. I thought I was just microwaving a banana.
Right.
Steins Gate reference.
Right.
Actually, yeah, I'm totally going to do that. Next superhero game, my character is going to is going to come from a future, and his whole thing is, I thought I was just microwaving a banana. But yeah, there are lots of cool things you can do, like the you're playing in a you're playing in a sci-fi game. You make characters for a sci-fi game, and the first session that happens, you end up stuck back in time in a medieval fantasy realm.
I know what you're talking about, Eric.
Yeah, it's not like we're not playing.
That didn't involve time travel.
That didn't involve time travel. That involved a Dyson sphere.
Yes. Because I'm weird.
Yeah, but yeah, and just the but not telling the players. So suddenly your skill in the 7 ranks you bought in Pilot Mecha are useless.
Yeah, you have to know your players for that, though.
Yeah.
You can't do that to your average gaming group, because if you don't really know that they'll be cool with that. With the right group, that will lead to immense amounts of hilarity and fun.
The concept, can I default to Pilot Mecha?
But I mean, there are a lot of players who would really think that's dirty pool.
Yeah,
I'm hard to argue. I find myself hard to argue with them on that.
I think it would be really fun for a one-off silly thing, or maybe
absolutely.
But yeah, for an extended campaign, it gets kind of wacky, and not the good kind of wacky.
Right. I mean, like with you guys, I told you guys ahead of time that this is what would be happening, yes. And you guys are all good enough to, okay, fine, we're not going to metagame this.
Which is why my character has so many ranks in useless bureaucratic bullshit, because I decided I wanted to play an accountant turned barbarian warlord.
Right. And I have no problem with the fact you guys all most of you guys took some skills that would be useful in some way, because
yeah.
But all of you for the most part basically played. You guys all played it straight, and it's worked out pretty well.
Hannah deciding that she's going to play a scientist at the Crisis of Faith and becomes a wizard. Mm-hmm. That's coming along fun, actually.
Yes.
No, I'm not a psyker. It's just, shut up. I'll figure it out.
Clearly, this is all it's either some advanced technology or psychic powers, or why am I getting no ratings of psychic powers from my?
Must be nanites. Everything makes sense with nanites.
Well, I mean, the technology here is so because they've got a dice sphere. This is more advanced than anything we've discovered so far. So clearly, it's got to be some really super advanced technology, right?
Yeah, sure.
And honestly, it might actually be.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter.
I haven't really I haven't decided mostly because it doesn't actually matter. Yes. But yeah, there's a lot of fun things you can do with time travel. I mean, the real question is whether you as a game master and whether the players want to deal with the concept of paradox, really.
Yes.
And also, you really have to sort of decide on the type of time travel you want. To have happen. Can you change the future by going to the past? I mean, that's an interesting question.
Yeah, that is a good question. Do you just make things worse? Is a timeline elastic where you change things but not in any significant manner?
Right. I think history will sort of bend itself back to where it ended up, just with slight changes in details. Or you go back in time and shoot Hitler, but someone a lot like him ends up in the same position doing the same basic things.
Or instead, monkeys take over.
Yeah, that would be different.
You know what? I want to play that game. I want to play a game where we go back in time specifically to assassinate some evil leader in history, and we are successful, and we travel back to the future, and it turns out super intelligent apes are in charge now.
Right.
We're okay, fuck. What did he do to prevent super intelligent apes from taking over the world?
Right. And you can have a lot of fun with the whole butterfly effect type thing if you really want to. Again, you have to have the right group of players and the right game master for that.
Yeah.
Not all game masters really are comfortable running that sort of game. I have no idea if I would be. I've never really thought about it. I could probably do it. I'm just not sure.
I could probably do it once a month. Is the thing.
Yeah, it'd take a fair bit of work.
And each session would be going back in time to prevent what next wacky lunatic future you've saddled yourselves with.
Yeah.
That would actually make a pretty good anthology show.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Yeah.
all right, now vampires are in charge. We're going to go back in time, make sure the Van Helsing line isn't accidentally wiped out in the chaos following Hitler's death, so that his descendants can continue hunting vampires. Except in doing that, we accidentally off the guy who's Frankenstein's monster's best friend. Now he rules the world with an iron fist, so we got to go back in time, make sure that doesn't happen.
Oh God, why is it so complicated? Yeah, and as we mentioned at the start of the show, we mentioned early on that there's of course feng shui, the Hong Kong action movie role playing game, which the campaign concept as a whole actually the campaign world has built-in time travel.
Yeah,
and it's sort of one of those games. It's the interesting thing about time travel in that is that as long so. You can travel to fixed points in history. Basically, there are portals in the world that lead to the Netherworld, which is this place between timelines. The Netherworld has portals out to very specific times in history, and as time passes in each timeline, it moves like as a day passes in the contemporary timeline juncture, as they call it. A day passes in all the other junctures and in the Netherworld. Right. But if you go and change something in that earlier time period, as a general rule of thumb, it will have no significant. It's sort of an inflexible timeline thing, as a general rule of thumb, unless
you accidentally make it so that the Pope is no longer a super powerful wizard who was also Hitler.
But that wouldn't actually
not Hitler, Elvis.
Right. Chinese Elvis Pope. No.
Sorry, they're so the same. I don't know why I conflated the two.
The big thing is that things don't change significantly unless you actually have control over what are called feng shui sites, which are places which accumulate mass quantities of qi, basically. And if you control the feng shui site, you get the benefits of that extra qi, making you more powerful. And if you control most of them in a juncture at a given time, the world and the way the world works bends to your will, and that will enable significant changes to history to happen. It's what's called a critical shift, and several of them have happened in the official continuity of feng shui. Our world exists because for a long time there were 4 immensely powerful sorcerers who each controlled a quarter of the world's feng shui sites, who ruled the world for centuries, until in 1986, basically, a bunch of individuals went back in time.
Same year as Great Big Trouble in Little China, if I remember correctly.
Went back and took control of the feng shui sites in the sort of round about the times they came to power. At which point, they basically never existed. The 4 monarchs. They actually did exist, because the big thing is that when a critical shift happens, most people don't notice things changing unless you've traveled through the Netherworld, in which case your perception of time is fixed to whatever currently is the way the world is currently. And the monarchs had all been to the Netherworld. So all of a sudden, okay, well, we're fixed in history, but no one else remembers us, and magic doesn't work anymore. It doesn't really work anymore. And our longevity spells aren't working. Fuck. Well, magic seems to still be working in the Netherworld. Let's just set up shop there. And that's sort of the basic premise for feng shui, in that, so there is it's a weird blend of both flexible future time travel and inflexible.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah. The idea that your changes don't really matter much unless you do enough of them, in which case it's sort of snowball.
Right.
So you got to change a lot of shit to make it work, but for the most part, things kind of slip back into place unless you make enough changes. Right. So that's something I like. I think that's kind of cool.
I think it works very well for a game. I think.
Yes.
Because if time travel, if changing things is too easy, then you really get a weird butterfly effect type game, and
yeah,
which could be good, I guess.
Can be fun. Like I said, we killed Hitler, but now vampires are in charge, so now we got to go back in time and fix that. Except in doing so, now Frankenstein's monster rules the world with an iron fist, so now we got to go back in time and change that.
Yeah. And that somehow leads to the...
And now the Reptoids are, like, out in the open, and they control everything, and humankind are slaves, so we gotta go back in time and change that.
Right.
Now the mole men are in charge. Who knows why they're even on the surface?
Right. So...
start working Reptoids into everything.
I'm not shocked, Eric.
It's just one of the most hilarious little conspiracy theory things out there.
It's pretty funny. But yeah, there's there are always little questions like what happens if you run into yourself? Can you run into yourself? Is that a good thing or a bad thing, etc. How do you want to deal with the fact that if you go back in time, honestly, most people won't be you'll be protected against most of the diseases that were rampant then, but most people most people back then wouldn't have been adapted to the modern versions of them.
Yeah, actually.
If you want to start thinking about things like seriously.
Oops, we accidentally caused a black plague.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's one of those things that's like, do you want to do this? I don't know. Do you want to include this in your game? I mean, and similarly, traveling to the future, the same thing could happen to you.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, can you travel in forward at the time? I mean,
yeah, that's another interesting question. Is that even a possibility?
Right. I mean, you can. Anybody can. I mean, if you've got,
we're doing it right now.
Right. Or if you've got sufficiently advanced cryotechnology, you could freeze yourself and be thawed out later. It's a one-way trip, but
yeah, kind of an awesome one-way trip, but
possibly
yeah.
That could lead to all sorts of problems. Like, what the hell are you going to do in the future? None of your skills will be actually applicable anymore, for the most part.
Men of the swords never go hungry, but we don't use swords anymore. We've got guns. Guns?
I mean, these are all things you have to think about if you want to include it. Basically, I mean, it's a game, so ignoring some of the actual real science is probably going to be unless you as you and your players are comfortable with your knowledge of actual science and applying it that way, you might want to skip some of it. I mean, you might want to use some of it anyways because it'd be fun and be interesting storytelling, but you basically have to pick and choose. And of course, there's also the question of exactly what is time travel. I mean, how does time travel actually work?
Right.
I mean, it's is it traveling is time linear, or is it or are you going to go through a more quantum theory thing where it branches and such? And in which case, if it's doing that, how do you get home? Can you get home?
Well, that's an entire TV series right there. It's called Sliders.
Right. I mean, or is the fact that the simple matter of you actually changing dimensions mean you never can get home because you've just created an alternate branch in quantum branch, and you can never get back to the original one. Just by the simple act of doing it.
Chris's character for the nascent, who knows if it's ever happening, superhero game.
Yep.
With the ridiculous luck powers, except they're not ridiculous luck powers. She just quantum shifts over to the timeline where things work out for her.
Right.
Of course, none of us perceive it. It just looks like she's really lucky.
And that's an interesting idea.
Yes.
I like that. Because it's an explanation for something that probably won't matter, and none of us would ever be aware of it.
Yeah. Unless you have another quantum hero who's just like, will you stop fucking doing that?
What do you mean? Doing what?
Every time you do that, I get a new set of memories. It's giving me a headache.
Doing
or
what?
Shift over to the point where I never said anything.
But doing what? I mean, I'm not doing anything. It's just I'm lucky. That's the best part, is that she has no freaking clue the character has no freaking clue that they're doing it.
the whole concept, she doesn't even really believe she has superpowers.
Right.
I don't know. I'm hanging out with you freaks. I don't have any powers.
So yeah, I'm just trying to think of other sort of time travel sort of things that have happened in games that I've been involved in, because I mean we could talk a bit about examples of time travel in games, and like we talk about things in general terms, but I think talking about more specific examples might be helpful.
Right. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of any specific examples. I know it's happened, but I can't think of anything.
Well, I mean, I can think of a couple of things where I've sort of outside of the occasional time travel thing in the Supers games I've run.
Right.
The ones mentioned with the two player characters. Another superhero game, I had a villain group that was a group of sort of transhumanist cyborgs in the future were coming back in time to basically start it earlier, effectively. Because they were like, well, we're in charge in the future now, but we've discovered time travel. We could be in charge in the past too.
Dun
Because
dun dun.
they're villains. I mean, and I know that in the GURPS sci-fi game I ran after during summers while I was in college with some of my friends around here. They didn't, strictly speaking, travel through time, but there were some weird sort of anomalies that they enabled them to see events from the past, and not directly interact with them. And it was mostly seeing stuff from so it was mostly ways I could do give them I mostly use it as ways to give them information about things that had gone on that would be useful to them later on in the campaign, or or to give them more background material for other stuff and such. So
Yeah, time traveling villains are kind of fun also.
I agree.
Like we've managed to destroy the world, but now we're going back in time to do it sooner. The whole concept behind the aborted space scaling for 40K.
Right. Well, something they're going back in time to make it happen sooner. We set things up to feed the entire universe of the Great Horned Rat, and now we're going to go back in time to make sure that happens. And coincidentally, we won't be there when the universe ends,
because we're awesome.
Which is one of the greatest supervillain plans ever.
Yes.
Haha! I have destroyed the universe, and I'm not going to be there when it blows up.
Ah, screw you.
Yeah. And there's always the classic sort of superhero comic book character of the guy who's come back in time to stop something, usually as an NPC in games,
right?
Who's come back in time to prevent some awful future from happening, but he can't tell anyone what it is or what it is he's trying to fix. And so he's doing a lot of things, some of which are good, seem good to the people going on, some of them seem bad to the people, to the heroes. And you're never entirely sure what he's doing. He sort of becomes a walking plot device.
Yeah. Completely inscrutable.
Right. Which is interesting. I've never done it myself, but I've seen write-ups of characters like that in various superhero games. And I've always thought it's interesting, but I've never really decided whether I want to do that or not.
I don't run many games. It's something that would be limited to, say, it would have to be a supers or sci-fi game.
Well, yeah.
Or maybe like a modern fantasy game. It just happens to be the future, because now I've decided there's science fiction there too.
Right.
I was just thinking that something would just be hilarious to drop on someone for a hilarious idea to drop in an otherwise straight what's the word I'm looking for? Contemporary game.
Right.
Because that, I don't know, there's time travel. I didn't tell you because I'm not allowed to, because it would have changed the past. But I'm trying to change the past because I need to change the future. But if I do it wrong, then everything gets all screwed up and we end up with mole men in charge again.
But why are you telling us this now?
Because if you don't let me go, then Hitler's brain will generate a new body and he'll take over.
What? That actually ties into something that Faye, who's the one who suggested this topic in the first place, in the chat brings up. Faye says that they should be curious to hear what our thoughts on using time travel as a side thing, like with the players working for the Time Core from the future, preserve the timeline, and that kind of dealie. It can work. It's a good campaign. It's a perfectly valid campaign concept.
That would actually be pretty awesome to be an overarching arc in like a Shadowrun game or a Cyberpunk game.
Yeah.
Where you don't actually know what's going on, but you know something's going on. Enough hints get dropped along over the course of the campaign before you come to the realization this lunatic thinks he's preventing a horrible future. But it turns out he's right.
Right. That'd be actually very cool. And actually, weirdly, I did run a short feng shui game. It wasn't exactly that, but the player characters were all working for the Ascended, who are the sort of shadowy group that runs the world in the contemporary and 1850s junctures. The Ascended are not the good guys, but they're not the worst of the bad guys either. That title probably goes to the Architects of the Flesh.
Yeah.
Either them or the Eaters of the Lotus. I'm not sure which. They're both fucking awful. So the basic concept was the players were basically brought in because they'd all basically experienced stuff involving the Secret War. Because there are a bunch of major factions, all of them are vying for control of history. That's sort of the basic background plot in feng shui. And so the player characters were all basically normal people who had seen something involving Secret War, and were competent enough that the Ascended decided to recruit them to form a team to basically make sure that when things like that happened, they were basically the cleanup crew to go in and make sure that the regular people didn't know that it happened. Yes, they were basically playing the Men in Black in feng shui.
That's actually kind of cool.
But instead of cleaning up after aliens, you have to clean up after, eunuch sorcerers fighting cybernetic monkeys from the future.
God damn it. Still haven't gotten a chance to play Cybernetic Monkey from the future.
Well, if I ever run a feng shui game, as long as you're willing to play, if you want to play an ex-jammer who's a cybernetic monkey, I'd allow that.
Okay.
That's perfectly fine. Actively still being a member of the jammers, not so much. Unless everybody really, really, really wants to play awful, awful people.
Okay, fair enough.
Either that, or you could, I guess, in theory, you could do an entire game of the jammer, like people who who are members of the jammers who don't realize exactly how batshit insane the battle chimp is. Yes, the leader of the jammers is the battle chimp Potemkin.
Because he's awesome.
Yeah, and his right-hand ape is Furious George. Who is, in fact, the battle chimp is a hyper-intelligent cybernetic chimpanzee, strategic and tactical genius, who's more than a little bit crazy.
What happens when you uplift monkeys?
No, not always. Some of them stay pretty sane. Potemkin, not so much. And there are reasons for why he's nuts. So, and Furious George is a very large, very strong, very powerful cybernetic gorilla with a helicopter pack and a chain gun.
Because awesome.
Specifically a chain gun arm, I should say. And missile launchers.
I do remember my character from the first game I played first game of Feng Shui I played with you, where I was basically playing a tabloid reporter who had put together everything that was going on with the Secret War and how people are trying to change the history using these certain sites and all this other lunacy. And of course, everyone thought he was fucking insane.
Right.
Except for the people that were actually in charge who wanted him dead.
Right. Well, they weren't pressuring it because nobody else seemed to believe him, but they were really. And if they could deal with you without expending much effort and attracting too much attention, they would. But you weren't a clear and present danger yet.
There were some great lines from that game. Marcus, everywhere you go explodes.
Yes, that's it. One of the all-time greats. That was a good game. Boing, 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 boing. Ah! Boing, boing, boing. Ah!
Oh, Roach's big pile of neuroses for his martial artist, who really just wanted to be an actor.
That scene in question was Roach's martial artist running in terror from a bunch of cybernetically enhanced hopping vampires.
Because that's honestly the same thing to do.
Honestly, yeah. So it's like, ah! Boing, 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 boing. Ah! Boing, 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 boing.
Have you seen my girlfriend? Well, perhaps you should show me a photograph so I can tell you whether or not I have. Oh, I should probably get one of those.
Oh, right, yeah. I think I have one in my hotel room. Oh, God. Roach's reaction when he realized that due to insane coincidences, because that's the rule of thumb in feng shui, he happened to look like the director of the architect's secret lab in Hong Kong Bay.
Of course, yes.
So he's able to bluff his way in.
So I am an actor. I believe that phrase got uttered many times during that particular session.
Dartful asks, what if the wizards and cyber monkeys were also aliens? That wouldn't have come up in feng shui. Aliens don't really exist in feng shui, so...
Well, then you're playing in the DC universe is what's happening.
Yeah, pretty much. Oh, God. But yeah, yeah, most of the time travel I've dealt with has been in feng shui because it's feng shui.
Yeah, it gets baked into the system.
Right. But I've done, and of course I said some superhero stuff.
Right.
Other examples of stuff from superhero games. But yeah, long story short, I mean, I generally don't try to treat it with too much rigor and science personally. I tend to just try to have more fun with it than anything else.
When time travel comes up in an RPG, I tend to treat it more like original series Star Trek than like hard Heinlein style SF.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. That's sort of my general rule of thumb.
Go with what feels right at the moment and make up some hilarious consequences.
Right,
There always have to be hilarious consequences.
Sure. Although I do recommend at least having a basic concept for what the how flexible the timeline is, basically.
Right.
You have to plan that out. You have to decide on that ahead of time and stick with it. Because if you change midstream it from being future inflexible to flexible futures, then that's going to confuse the players.
Then you end up becoming your own grandfather. Yay, Futurama.
Oh, that's Richard becoming Mr. I'm my own grandfather. Take that, causality!
That's a great episode.
It is. It really is.
I've got 3 more. Contents of creature's stomach. Deviled egg. Ooh! The same deviled egg.
Oh, that was a good episode. And of course, there are lots of different types of time travel you can do too. I mean, you can always have individuals in adventures being a particular type of specialized time travel. Like you can do an entire Groundhog Day episode, basically.
Yeah. Or if you really hate your players, Endless 8.
Yeah, don't do that.
Like I said, really hate your players.
But I mean, and the Groundhog Day thing has been done a few times, not just in the movie Groundhog Day, but I mean, there was a great episode of Stargate SG-1 where that was
possibly their best episode, honestly.
It's one of their best. It's fucking hilarious.
There's a particularly disturbing Farscape episode where they were really just there as tourists. They get sucked into a time warp. They have to change the past, accidentally change the past, and they have to go back and eventually they figure out something where not everyone ends up dead. It's just a particularly depressing ending.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah,
Oh god, that episode. They did time travel a couple times in Farscape.
they did. Not always time travel. Sometimes it was the ancients brain fucking Crichton because, well, he's right there. What else are they gonna do with him?
Yeah. God, Farscape's good though.
Farscape's so good.
Love that show. Love it, love it,
Food,
love it.
family. Is there a difference?
But yeah, you can have a lot of fun with time travel, and there's a lot of interesting things that can happen with it. But I do think that you either need to use it in small doses, or else build the entire campaign around it.
Yeah, it's there could be fun shenanigans involved.
But if you are using it and it's not an entire campaign built around it, then don't overuse it because it'll like any other plot element will get stale. And your players will eventually get very tired of it.
Oh, Jesus Christ, that's something to do in a... That's how you do the whole, like, working for the guy trying to change the future. Turns out he's the last... in a cyberpunk game, turns out the guy from the future is the last survivor of the team from the far future.
Right.
So when they finally confront him about it, it's like, you cried first time you watched Old Yeller, which you saw the Hollow version remake from 2022. I never told anyone about that. That's right, because I'm you, dumb shit. Because I told you. I told you it was you last session. You didn't believe me.
Oh, that's a good twist.
Yeah.
That takes the campaign in a very interesting way.
Yes.
Direction.
There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with that, actually.
I like that. I like that a lot. Wow. Damn! Though you have to choose the right player for it, I think. But,
yes, absolutely.
But yeah, that realization for the players when it happens, their reaction would be priceless. Oh my god, that'd be awesome.
That'd be great.
But yeah, before we get to we actually did get an email question which I want to touch on. But before we get to that, I do want to sort of go back a little bit to Doctor Who. Because Doctor Who is, well, for a lot of people, the first thing you think about when you think about time travel. I mean, it's either that or Terminator, basically.
Yeah.
For the most part. I mean, for some people, that's not for everybody, but for a lot of people. But, I mean, there is a Doctor Who role-playing game out there. I have not played it, but I've heard good things about it. Actually, I think there's more than one, but there's one that's currently in print, I should say. Which I've heard some interesting things about. It looks interesting. And I did, at one point, start working on a campaign idea which borrowed ideas from Doctor Who, but instead of... Basically, instead of traveling through time, it was a dimension-hopping game. And basically, there's a scientist who invented a ship that could travel through dimensions. And the players were all from different alternate realities that all got accidentally sucked into the ship, and they were now... Basically, all of them were horribly lost in dimensional space and had no idea how to get home. And so that was a large sort of basic concept, was basically traveling through the dimensions, trying to find a way back to your actual home dimensions, and at the same time, basically getting sucked into, various adventures and such. And eventually there's an actual sort of overarching plot behind it about, saving the multiverse and such.
Mm. That could be really fun. That could be pretty cool.
But yeah, so there was an equivalent of the Doctor, but less directly, I guess less central to the plot, I should say. Dartfall's right. There's a significant element of sliders to it too, but except that, yeah, it's honestly the professor in question wasn't actually trying to develop a way to specifically a way to travel through dimension. to travel between alternate realities, she was basically effectively working on a hyperdrive. And oops. It did go into an alternate hyperspace. If she was theorizing it was an alternate dimension, and it was. Just that she didn't go back to her original dimension when she went through hyperspace and so on.
Dope.
Oops.
That would be a fun. That's a good character concept, also.
Yeah.
Man, I'm more scatterbrained than I thought I'd be today.
Well, that's all right, Eric, because we're coming up on we're up at the point of the time of the show when we answer questions, if we have any.
Oh yeah.
We did get an email question. Let me dig it up. Here we go. This is from Zent the First. Zent writes, if you were to designing your own pen and paper role-playing game, what would the setting be like and what system would you use it for?
I'm sorry, what was that?
So if you were designing your own pen and paper role-playing game, what would the setting be like and what system would you use for it?
Ooh. I think if I were going to do that, I'm not sure what I'd do for a system, because I'm not much of a systems guy. I'll probably just steal from a bunch of other systems that I like and create this sort of hodgepodge lurching monstrosity of a system.
Right. I do think that it's more sort of creating your own sort of taking an existing system and writing your own sort of campaign world for it more than anything else.
Right. But if I were going to do my own world,
your own setting, yes,
probably be something where anything can go, which means it would probably be, I hate to say it, similar to Rifts.
Right.
Except not sucky. At least I hope not sucky. I really hope not sexy.
Not sexy?
Well, it can be sexy, but once.
You said not sexy, so I was like, you're scatterbrained. I know. I'm giving you crap, Eric. Eric, I'm giving you crap.
Difficult.
But not sucky, yes. So you want to go for something where basically anything can go.
Yeah, it's like you've got space orc sorcerers riding velociraptors which transform into motorcycles.
Of course it would.
Of course it would. Because why would you... If you're building your own world, like, it would either be... Why bother limiting things? I could tell you why bother limiting things, because otherwise you end up like, is that friggin', you end up with something like Rifts, is what happens.
I know, but I can totally see the appeal of that, honestly. I mean, I see the appeal of Rifts, honestly.
Yeah, and it's... Yeah.
Well, I mean, for me, I routinely design my own game worlds, honestly.
Yeah, I think it would have to depend on the system I ended up using.
Oh, of course, absolutely.
Like doing sort of a gritty sci-fi game with like fantasy elements, I'd probably use GURPS.
Yeah, GURPS or Hero would be my go-to for that. I'd lean towards GURPS for that, but yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've written my own. I've got my own D&D setting that I use. I've used in multiple editions of D&D.
Yeah, if I'm planning on doing a fantasy game, it would probably be. Yeah, if we're doing more of a fantasy game, it would probably lean more heavily towards low fantasy than high fantasy.
Right.
But of course, it's still going to have different races like dwarves and orcs and hobbits and whatnot.
Yeah, I've done several different fantasy games using different systems over the years. I mean, of course, there's the long-running Shadowlands campaign setting I've used multiple times.
Right.
And there's also the... Oh, God, there's a setting I really want to do a campaign in, but it works best in Hero.
Right.
And in Hero system, and that involves teaching people Hero, which I don't mind doing, but it does take effort. Which I did run about 5 sessions, maybe 6 with you guys.
Yeah.
It borrows heavily on some concepts from Madeline Engel's Ursula K. Le Guin's series.
Right.
mostly on the sort of the from the sort of the concept of the power of your true name and such. So, and that was sort of one of the the sort of big sort of points. And although after that point I diverged heavily, but I had my own set of races. Although I did use goblins and dwarves because I like and elves because they're fantasy staples and there's a reason for it.
They're awesome.
But I had a few of my own races thrown in on top of that, and I really liked the game world.
You're a scatterbrain.
Well, I'm just sort of trying to think.
I'm contagious.
Well, the problem is that's not a setting I've written down a lot for, so I'm trying to remember details. But for me, my campaign settings that I come up with when I do them, I've written several. I've done several of them. So I've got Shadowlands. I've got that one. I've done a couple of different sci-fi universes. But usually, what ends up happening is I basically base it around. I take a concept I find interesting and build out from it.
Yes.
For the setting, like for the Shadowland campaign was, okay, what if the player character playing in a world where the bad guys won? I was like, okay, well, it's going to be D&D, so what bad guys do I want to choose to have won? The Drow make a good choice. So how would the Drow win? Okay, this is how I envision the Drow winning, and build that from there. The hero fantasy game I was talking about basically was I really like the concept of the true name being important. So I build out from this. So what does that imply? How do I build out from that? And I built the world out from there. The sci-fi campaign that I ran with Eric and those guys, the Pirates campaign. That universe was built on the concept of basically taking the universe's main part of the focal point of the universe is very large, very powerful sort of intergalactic society, the hegemony, which has been around forever and is slowly creaking and collapsing under its own weight and age. Effectively, it's late period Rome, basically.
Space Rome.
Yeah.
That game needed more togas. Because I didn't spend any time in the actual hegemony, but...
No, and no, there weren't any togas.
Yeah, space toga. We made terrible, terrible people for the Earthsea game.
Not all of you. You and Chris did. Hannah and Leland made actually nice guys.
That's true. Chris made a terrible, terrible person.
Yes.
I was redeemable, but Chris's character was terrible.
Yeah, Chris has mentioned that he was actually like, I probably would have had to change characters at some point. That was one of the times that Leland made a genuinely nice guy character.
Yes, Leland often makes genuinely nice guy characters.
He tends to hit on those two ends of the spectrum, is what I've noticed.
Yes, they're either horrible, horrible bastards, or genuinely nice guys,
or Burr, who is just weird.
Who is just weird.
Just fucking
Leland
weird.
always makes something weird, but
yeah. And then Will's character was sort of it was actually a fairly decent guy who unfortunately had a bit of effectively a tragic flaw of desiring power.
Yes.
So unfortunately, Will wasn't playing.
Say.
Will wasn't playing when I actually. You guys
dropped
actually
the friggin' nameless entity of horribleness on us.
Who was offering you guys each of you a wish, basically.
Yeah.
That can't possibly go wrong.
Yeah. Chris and I were the only one who took it up. Chris wished for fuck tons of money.
Yep.
And I went, I want you to never, ever, ever do anything against me ever. I want it in writing. I want it ironclad.
Yep, and the entity the unnamed would never directly done anything to directly harm you, or cause you any discomfort. Directly harm you in any way.
Right. Which, because my character was actually terribly smart, would have gotten him fucked.
Well, the word directly was involved.
Yes.
Not that it was a phased bargain or anything like that, but it was a Oh, that campaign. I do wish.
Probably a good thing that one collapsed.
Yeah, that wasn't going anywhere good. Probably just the group was just not set up properly for it. I think.
Yeah.
I do want to try the system again, that setting again, but I don't know when or where or with whom. But it's an interesting system.
If I'm involved, I'll promise not to make a horrible bastard.
Okay.
You'll have to remind me of that promise, but because there's a roughly 50% chance that I will.
Yeah, I'd say that's about right. Oh God. So yeah. Thanks for the question, Zent. I hope that answered it to some degree. But yeah, mostly as a system, the system would basically would be what system I chose if I haven't written my own system yet, and I don't know if I ever will. But the campaign setting would be somewhat tied to what system I was planning on using, or
Yeah, I'd probably start with what kind of game do I want to run,
right,
and then move on to what system I'd be stealing from.
Right. But yeah, I mean, I've got my own superhero universes that I've done. Star City is where it's sort of based in. I most of the time when I'm running a game, it's going to be my own campaign world. I like world building.
Yeah, world building is really fun, and I don't run often. Usually what will inspire me to run is if there's either a system I really like or a world I really want to play in.
Right.
Or play with. Like, that's how I got everyone into Iron Kingdom. Is like, Iron Kingdoms is awesome, and we're going to play in it because it's a new game system that looks good. We're doing it, shut up.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this week. Unless you got any last sort of thoughts on time travel games before we go.
I probably will later, but then I'll just time travel back and have said it. So.
So if you hear some weird sort of bizarre stuff,
don't microwave the banana.
Thank you, future Eric. So we'll be back next week with a new topic. We've got a couple of topics in the can, as it were, that we will hopefully start thinking about before we decide what topic.
Actually, decide to do anything with them.
Right, because though odds are we'll probably go, oh right, we have to come up with the topic about 5:30 p.m. on next Tuesday, because that's the sort of people we are.
That's pretty much how we do it.
Yeah. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you all had fun. If you've got questions you'd like answered on the show, we do try to save time at the end of each show to answer viewer questions. You can send them to us. Our email address is surlygrognards@yahoo.com, surlygrognards@yahoo.com. Or you can post them on our forums. We've got forums over at mechagm.forumer.com. If you've got show topic suggestions, we love getting those. Please send them to us. You can send them to either the email address or post them on the forums. We really love the topic suggestions. We really do.
We really do.
Also, if you've got feedback for us, constructive criticism, we love hearing how we can make the show better, so please tell us. Also, if you enjoyed the show, please feel free to like and subscribe on YouTube if you're watching this on YouTube. And tell your friends if you enjoy the show, if you think you got people know people who you think would enjoy the show. We love getting viewers. We record the show live on twitch.tv/mechagm every Tuesday night at 7:30 p.m. 7 p.m. Eastern.
Told you, man, I'm contagious.
Yeah, probably.
You're all doomed now. Soon you won't be able to hold a thought in your... Hey, look, I found a thing.
Yeah. If we do have to delay the show, if we're starting late, or if we're going to have to take a week off, or if we're changing the day we're recording on again, because we do that occasionally, depending on our schedules, though we don't do it that often. I will be sure to tweet it out. You can check my Twitter handles at mechagm, so if you follow me there, you'll be able to know what's coming up with the show. If you want to catch earlier episodes of the show, most of them are available on my blog, which is at mechagm.blogspot.com, and I'm getting everything uploaded, transferring all the previous recordings onto YouTube. So keep an eye on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/mechagm. You can find all sorts of you'll be able to find most of them there. Hopefully, I'll be able to get all of them up at some point in the near future. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. we'll see you guys soon. Take care and have a great evening.
Bye, humans.